Welcome to the Build a Mind podcast. I'm Joel Thomas.
And I'm Kalen Folk.
And our first order of business today, we have the NAPE conference coming up here in Houston. That's February 18th through 20th. Please come stop by our booth at Bitcoin Mining World and say hi. Some of us are going to be there, and we would love to hang out with you and talk about Bitcoin, and especially in an oil and gas conference. And now a quick word for our sponsors here. This episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Mining World. If you already have miners, but you don't want the headache of power contracts, build outs, uptime, and daily ops, we can help with managed hosting and co-location through vetted partners. You keep the ownership of your machines. We help you get hashing with fewer surprises. Go to bitcoinminingworld.com and reach out. Tell us what model miners you have, how many, and your timeline. And our next sponsor here, this episode is also brought to you by PowerProfitBTC.com. If you're an energy operator with curtailment, wasted load, or tricky interconnect, PowerProfit BTC is built for you. At PowerProfitBTC.com, you can walk through our evaluation tools to pressure test a mining project, assumptions, pricing, uptime, and real-world constraints that kill deals. Don't guess, model it, then decide. All right, Kalen, how you feeling today?
We're feeling good. We got a pretty fun episode today for the home mining sector, getting real into the weeds on some of these BitX development projects that are going out that are really kind of changing the game for home miners and just allowing Bitcoin to be decentralized as Satoshi imagined. So super pumped for this episode. I think this is one that people are not going to want to miss.
Well, hopefully you're staying warm out there. I know a lot of the country got destroyed in a snowstorm. I mean, I know like all of my miners have been down for a week, and two of them finally just came back online yesterday. And I'm like, yo, where's the rest? And but my BitX has been ripping the whole time. Yep. And I'm just mining at home. So I'm going to introduce our guest today, who is Sean Grant. Sean is the founder of Ixtech, a veteran-owned U.S.-based manufacturer of home miners, custom 3D printing and laser etching solutions. He, along with his other three team members, design and build solutions for home miners to help the mission of Bitcoin and mining decentralization. So, Sean, welcome to the Build a Mind podcast. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
It's a real pleasure to have you here. So why don't you tell us about your background and how you got into Bitcoin?
Sure. So actually, my background, grew up on the West Coast in Las Vegas. Me and my brother and our friend Chris, we grew up together. I ended up joining the military. Did 5 years, 2 deployments for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Got out, stayed in West Coast, and got into data and analytics. So I worked for a couple tech companies out in California, a couple startups out there. Some of the defense space, working with drones and some open source software and open source hardware, similar to the BitX and that development. And then got a new job, moved out east, and then during that time, we just started getting into Bitcoin. I actually got into Bitcoin in 2017. So initially during that big bull run back then, thought it was really cool. I was like, all right, everyone's talking about it. Maybe I should look into it and get some of it. So, went on to Coinbase, probably like everybody else, bought some Bitcoin, bought some Ethereum, bought some Litecoin, was like, oh, this is like the gold, the silver, and the bronze of the digital world. And so didn't really just brush the surface, didn't really look into it much. It crashed, and I thought, all right, this is a scam. It's not worth it. It's not going to go anywhere. Just leave it alone. Forget about it. Then, COVID came around and really started getting into more discussions online with folks, started digging into it, got into Clubhouse, and Bitcoin rooms started popping up and people talking about it. I'm like, all right, let me look into this a bit more and see what it's about. Started digging into it a bit more at the same time. My brother got a 3D printer for Christmas, and we're like, hey, we can, let's start doing some GPU mining and start mining some stuff and get some of this crypto stuff. At the same time, started getting hands-on, started learning more and more about Bitcoin, and just fell down the massive rabbit hole. My brother and I decided, hey, let's make a business out of this. Let's go ahead and see if we can use our 3D printer to start building, parts and stuff for GPU miners, and then scale it out to ASICs. A lot of people started buying ASICs at that time and started doing home mining, started getting more into that realm. And we've kind of scaled it up since, and hopped on this train of the BitX to help and decentralize and get more home miners in the hands of folks.
So what problem were you guys trying to solve originally when you started Ixtech? Is there a central thing aside from just, getting into like, hey, this is a cool opportunity. We care about Bitcoin. This is something we can do.
Yeah, that's a good question. It really came down to, we recently just updated our website with just a statement right on the front page of it: elegance and performance. When we saw the solutions that were out there, originally around GPU mining, then with ASICs, we were like, wow, these work okay, but they look like crap, right? It's like, you know what? We want something that's going to look good and perform very well. Something I want to, show off my mining rig, or something that, like, there's all these different kind of colors and combinations and design things that we can put into it and make it look really good, but also step back and use our experience in the mechanical and electrical engineering side to see how can we improve the performance. And that's really where we kind of step in. Like, we're not about, massive manufacturing and just getting something that's plain and shipping it out to the masses. It's really, the bespoke items out there, and really focusing on that elegance and performance. Does it look good? Does it perform well? And that's kind of been our mantra for all the products that we've built, whether it's, simple GPU hangers to, some of the more complex stands and stuff we built for the bit axes, or even some of the other parts that we've been designing for, different pieces around the home mining.
Well, before we get too much further, and not to take you off track, but what was your major innovation in the home mining bit axe space? What is your creation? Let's kind of go into depth on that guy.
Ours is the Nerd QX. So there's a good picture of it right there. So what this is it's a home miner, right? So this actually has 4 different chips. This originally is a new version, say a new iteration of the Nerd QX++. Now, the names are probably getting confusing, so probably a little backstory on the whole BitX, NerdX, and these naming conventions would probably help. Originally, you have the BitX, right? So this was making, I guess the easiest way to say is make mining available to everybody. So if you wanted to go buy a Bitcoin miner, you really only had a couple options. You had the S9s back in the day, but right now the profitable ones are the S19s. These are big machines, 240 volts, which isn't common here in the US for folks. And they have 3 hash boards, several hundred chips on them, and they're expensive to run, they're expensive to buy, and they're loud. You have to keep them cool. So it's not, there's a big barrier to entry for folks. Now, what some folks over in the OSMU community, Scott has done, as well as previously, before Scott, you got the folks over at Gecko Science, is seeing if we can take single chips off and put those into a smaller form factor that people can run, whether it's a USB miner or just a single chip runs off a regular barrel power supply. And thus was born the concept of a bit axe. Let's just take one chip off of that whole hash board and see if we can get that one chip running. Now, it's not going to be profitable. It's a lottery miner, right? So it's, there's that chance that you could hit it, because it's, there's just a random chance that your ASIC could hit that block, and then you get the reward for that. And so they started off with, some older chips. You had the BitX Max, which was the first one, and then newer chips came out. They upgraded it to the Ultra, then the Supra, then the Gammas, right, using the latest chips. And then out of that, as what you will see, what happens in the open source and development community, you'll have different projects sort of spawn off of that, right? You'll have the main one, and then another group of people are like, well, this is cool. There's these really cool displays that we could also use from LilyGo. Beautiful, vibrant 3-inch or 2.3-inch displays. Let's do a fork off of it and call it the NerdAxe line. And so they did the same thing. Let's do the NerdAxe, but bigger display and the same single chip. Then that's, once again, it kind of exploded. Okay, can we, instead of 1 chip, can we do 4 chips? So then they did 4 chips, and then they upgraded those to the latest ones. And so that's where the line kind of came from. So the Nerd Q meaning quad, 4 chips, quad axe, and then the plus was the 1368 chips, and then the plus was 1370.
And just for our at-home guys, when you're talking about chips specifically with that first iteration of the model, what ASIC were you snatching chips from, and compared to what are you pulling from now to create your NerdAxe Q Plus?
So we try to buy new chips when possible, but we ended up we had a vendor that we were using. They just ghosted us, and then we couldn't get chips from them. They took the money and basically ran. So we were kind of under a deadline. And so we were like, well, can we just pull them off of an ASIC? Can we buy an ASIC board or take one of our boards out of our machine and rip the chips off of it? So we kind of self-taught ourselves how to desolder chips off of actual ASICs. So then we ended up starting off with the 1368s to build our Supras. Those are the first ones that we started producing ourselves. And so, yeah, we learned how to desolder off of theirs. And then once we started building the Gamma version, that was the BM 1370 chips. So we started doing that, started using the S21 boards, and then started to desolder those chips off and try to purchase new where we can. But that's been a struggle.
A little bit of a challenge. Yeah. So when
No.
you're buying them new, you're getting them on the whole roll where you're getting just the big.
Yeah, you're
big
getting them right off the
circles.
reel, which is nice if you can get it.
I
So,
would imagine so. Yeah. And what's that like? So do you guys have any like, I know back in the day you could go take that 2-week Bitmain class to get Bitmain certified, and then you have the ability to buy directly from Bitmain. Is that something that is that the route that you guys took, or are you guys going through third-party vendors, or how are you going about to source these chips?
yeah, it's just whatever third-party vendor we can talk to that had them. Previously there were some other vendors that were producing BitAxes. They were able to get some chips from Bitmain, but then that source dried up, and then we went to another source, and then the same thing, it dried up. From what we were told is that Bitmain, once you request to buy new chips, they want to see like serial numbers off hash boards to know that it's actually going to a full ASIC miner and not going to like BitAxes and you're selling it to them. And so it's just definitely been a challenge.
Man, I've dealt with a lot of these Bitmain certified technicians that come on site to repair even warranty miners and stuff. And like, it doesn't surprise me that that's kind of your story with working with Bitmain directly. I mean, going back with some of our repair techs, I mean, they're coming up and they're like, well, yeah, we come to Bitmain as a third-party consultant, and we have a price per board that we charge Bitmain to run all of our warranties. Sometimes it's a quick like EEPROM chip, where we just replace that guy real quick. It takes me 10 minutes. My company has to pay me $15, whatever. But other times, and that's a quick, easy, cheap repair. Other times there's like 15 bad ASICs, and each of those ASIC chips cost $20, $30. And that board alone repair costs $900. And they're just hoping that when they go out to these sites to fulfill these Bitmain warranty repairs, that they're getting more of the cheaper ones compared to some of the expensive ones. So I'm not surprised that they're real hush-hush and kind of trying to gatekeep the ASIC chip market to themselves. Has there been any experimentation on the BitAx side of things without using Bitmain's chips? Like we know some other Bitmain manufacturers. I mean, you all know MicroBT with WhatsMiner, and then the Avalon units, and now with BitDeer coming out. And I know there's some kind of smaller third-party people. Even Intel tried their hand at it a few years back. But have you guys gone down any of those routes to try and source chips?
Yeah, so there's been some good work, mainly because of this supply issue, right? Like we're beholden to one manufacturer, to Bitmain. There was some work trying to be done on the WhatsMiner, the MicroBT chips, but that the team focused. It was just a small development team initially over there at OSMU that did the Bitmain. But yeah, so then there was what's around. Like who has ASIC chips out there that's one, willing to work with the open source community, two, is going to help the community not only provide chips but also provide documentation, because that's the other thing. Bitmain does not provide the documentation, so all these engineers are being detectives and having to figure out where things are going in to get the pads and get everything designed properly. And so there has been some work. There's been some prototypes made. I believe Scott was saying, they've got the Intel chips, like you mentioned. Those are available. The price point's right because they're free. Intel stopped producing them, but there's several million out there. So you're able to still build. They showed, I think it was the 256 Foundation had, they posted the other day, and they had, they showed the boards. They had some Intel Bonanza chip boards running, right? And I know that they've done some work with the BitAxes as well. There's some early work done with Auradine as well. So Auradine has been open to selling chips. They were 256 once again was giving away a bunch of the chips that they had, and there's some other vendors out there that have made or designing miners based on the Auradine chips as well. So there's always hope that Block will also get into the game a bit and see what they've got some chips out there. I know that they've had some conversations with them about it, but yeah, so there's still some work. I think you'll see this year will probably be the big year. You'll see BitAx other than Bitmain coming out. So. And available to the development. It's going to be great. Yeah, it's going to give people different options. And, Bitmain just missed the boat. I mean, they had a good opportunity to sell those chips to really increase their margin. But, it gives us manufacturers and other options out there. And, what new design and form factors can we create with these new chips, right? And how can we get those implemented?
Yeah, I mean, it real similar to the whole GPU and RAM debacle that's going on currently. Like NVIDIA going away from doing more retail graphics cards, and now AMD stepping up. So it does provide an opportunity for some of these other companies to kind of step in if they do want to fill these roles. It's just a question of getting them to actually do it.
Yeah.
I think I'm mispronouncing it, just even though you just said Auradine.
Auradine, yeah.
That's a company that we've heard quite a bit about, kind of on some of the few conventions that me and Joel have been out together just through conversation. But I can't. I mean, from my five looking up, you're going to what to mine, right? To check your ASICs. You're like, what's out there right now? You got Bitmain, you've got Avalon, you got MicroBT, and then you kind of have BitDeer. So do you know if have they produced any ASIC like machines full fledged before? I know we touched on Block a little bit too, but kind of is just those big three, unless I'm missing.
Yeah, those are the big three. I mean, yeah, Auradine is up and coming. They have some machines out there. I did actually have a conversation at the last Bitcoin conference there in Vegas with BitDeer to talk with them a bit about it. About, hey, would you be offering your chips up? At the time, they said no, but I think that there's still been some ongoing conversations with them. So hopefully, the Seal Miner, that's a very powerful ASIC, and so folks really like that one. Maybe that'll be something else, another option for us to look at and to start manufacturing and use their chips.
Yeah, and you touched real quick on the on Block getting into it. Like that when that miner came like just from what was it, Mining Disrupt that they announced it at? Is that right? I mean, the whole idea of it, like the front plate removable with the magnets for the fans to get those, like the whole thing just looked extremely nice as a like, mining operator, or a site runner, whatever you want to call me. And that was really enticing. Have you seen? I haven't heard anything else out of them. Are they still going?
Yeah, as far as I know, they're still going. Still taking. I believe they're still taking orders for them, and people are still looking at them. It's still a bit closed sourced, and they don't have like the chips and all that stuff out there. And I know there's a couple groups that are really looking to get their hands on it to really tear it apart. But as far as I know, they're still going.
Nice.
So if you had to forecast, because it sounds like obviously one of the major problems here in the home mining sector is acquiring the chips. If you had to forecast, like, where do you see this going in the next 5 to 10 years? And you think it is going to be easier or more difficult to acquire chips for home mining?
I think it's going to be easier. I think it's just because we'll have more options, more choices. If you went back 2 years ago and told us, hey, we would be selling over a petahash a year worth of bit axes, we would have told you, you're crazy. No, we wouldn't be able to. And we're just a small time manufacturer. You have other manufacturer vendors out there that are pushing thousands of these a month. And I think once that one bit axe hit that block, it really got everyone's like, whoa, I can actually do this. It's not just it's you could hit it. And many people have started hitting them. On these 4-chip miners like the QX++. Somebody hit one not too long ago as well. So people are seeing that there's these chances, and then new upgrades to the firmware allow you to split those chips, right? You can split half those chips to mine Bitcoin, other half to mine Bitcoin Cash. So you're starting to see people start mining, all these altcoins as well, not just Bitcoin. But I think, what you're going to see is a lot more options available, and that's going to open the market up. People are going to see how popular these are. And hey, maybe I can sell, like Auradine or whatever. I can sell, a couple thousand extra chips to this vendor, and I can recoup that cost. And hey, this market's growing. So you're starting to see other vendors come into play sort of on the peripheral that aren't traditionally within this space as well. Things like Noctua, Arctic. They're focused on CPUs or thermalites, right? They're focused on regular PCs. They're saying, why are people, why has my sales for the AXP90 gone through the roof? Or it's like, well, people are putting them on their miners right now. So there was a funny story. There was another company, SilentX. They made like heat sinks and other little things like that. And they made this one heat sink that fit perfectly on the BitX Gamma. And it was just an all copper cylindrical sort of finned heat sink. It looked crazy and beautiful. And it's like one of the best performing heat sinks out there. We call it Copperzilla. And it's, you can't get it. You couldn't get it. Like you can try to get it on eBay, and then manufacturers like us and a few others reached out to them, and they're like, yeah, we were just going to close that down and not do anything. And then all of a sudden we saw everyone get snatched up. So we're looking at restarting that whole line and redesigning it and just putting it out there because we're seeing such a high demand. So I think just going back to the original question, you're just going to see it. It's going to explode. You're going to see more variations, more companies getting involved, and you're going to see the chip manufacturers. Maybe Bitmain or whatnot will open their eyes a little more, maybe free up some more chips. But you're going to see. I think you'll see other vendors out there, other people out there, making chips more easily accessible to people.
It's pretty late on the exposure of that, but is this the heat sink that you're specifically talking about?
No, that's Silent X.
Because I've seen some of these, like, kind of what I would claim is kind of like a ridiculous heat sink on these tiny home miners.
There are some really ridiculous ones. It's the IXN-40C Silent X.
What efficiency gains are you getting out of something like this? I mean,
it's you're seeing amazing. You're able to push these chips. Like, I think that kind of leads into the innovation with the QX. Like, why we built it was when you get to the BitX Supers and then up to the Gammas. The BN1370 chip's a very, very powerful chip, right? Out of the box, just regular default settings, you get 1.1 terahash out of it. Right, and you can get 15 watts, just 15 watts of power on it. So, one of the cool things about this was that we started seeing when people get the Silent X IXN40, or they're upgrading it to Raspberry Pi heatsinks, right? So that's another sort of industry that's off to the side that people will start to see a rise. Like the 52 Pi Low Profile Plus allows you to overclock the heck out of this chip. You can get this chip that's normally 1.1 terahash, you can push it past 2. And
wow.
And you can, you're going to be using consumption efficiencies going down, but people have been squeezing as much terahash out of it. And that's what we started seeing with, people started doing on the bit axis. It was a great solid platform to do it on the single chips. And then they started doing it on the multi-chip. The only difference was that the multi-chip, the QX line, wasn't designed for the overclocking. That was the biggest thing. It was designed to spec, like, hey, I'm going to get 5 terahash out of these 4 chips. Maybe you can push it a little bit, but there's other components along the board that would start to go past their max ratings that wouldn't allow you to.
Are there any safety concerns with that? Because I think about, as somebody who doesn't know a ton about, like, for example, I've never built a computer, but my father has been doing it since I was probably in diapers. You know what I mean? So, and my assistant who sits with me all day, he builds computers and he's like super into this stuff. And so when I think about like overclocking and stuff like that, from like a beginner's point of view and somebody who doesn't build, are there any dangers or safety risks? For example, if I got this chip sitting in my basement on like a BitX and it's just ripping and I'm pushing it to the limit, is there like a fire hazard or anything like that?
There is. I think one of the things that the community has done, especially working on the firmware side that's inside of there, is put stop gaps inside of there to make sure that it doesn't, if it goes past a certain temperature, it shuts down, right? It automatically shuts down. There's no way to bypass it. So some of these are hard limits inside the code. Now, obviously, it's open source, so you can go past it and you can just really open it up, and it's buyer beware. It's overclock at your own risk. Also, there's, as I said before, the popularity of BitX has just grown massively within the past year and a half or so. And now what you're starting to see, because it is open source hardware and open source software, anybody can go in and manufacture. You're just seeing the market getting flooded with a whole bunch of sort of some knockoffs or whatever, but duplicates, BitX is produced out of China, like on AliExpress, right? And as we've seen with a lot of these, they're using cheaper components and cheaper power supplies that, so as you plug them in, you're like, this power supply is really hot. That's not safe. Or, other components on there, they're just, the boards themselves are just getting extremely hot. So there is some components there. There is some risk involved with that. But from the specifications on the hardware, and if you load it with the proper firmware, there are some safeguards put into place to help prevent it from overheating. But
the firmware question that you brought up is intriguing for me, because I know aftermarket firmware for regular ASICs, like we've got Lux, Finish, Marathon, Brains, whatever, but what are you talking about for the BitX? Because Scott offered, our boss, he gave me a BitX. That's my BitX. I got a Supra 1.1T, but I didn't know. Is there aftermarket firmware for these
Um,
things that you can? I have no clue
Yeah,
about that.
I mean there is. So just like I said with the BitX and the NerdX lines, there's been splits, and then people fork the repos and compile their own versions of firmwares that do certain things. So you have the main supported firmware that. So if you open up your BitX, you go to your settings, you can go to the update. That goes right to the repo, and you can verify that this is the firmware that's produced by OSMU, and you can do the checks on it to make sure that that's the right one, and that's sort of the official firmware. That's the one you want to use. Other people have forked it, like on the Nerd line, for example. Like we use the LilyGo displays, the bright displays, is the ability to plug in another hardware component behind that display that allows you to now do an Ethernet connector to it, right? So, somebody's taken the firmware, forked it, made some changes to it, and then worked it for their specific hardware piece. And then there's other ones out there that have removed all safety limits, and it's just whatever
Let
you
it
want to
go.
put it, let it go. And it's like, it's not safe. We don't recommend it, right? But
Have you guys gone into any of those like forks directly? So like, is your side more on the manufacturing side and like getting the schematics for the PCB board aligned to fit the specific ASICs and the power supply, or are you like what I would imagine like the coder nerd behind everything? Like what?
Yeah, no, mainly the hardware side. So we do work with the engineers, the coders on developing the firmware. So like when we built the Nerd QX, for example, there was the hard limits inside there, not just for the temperatures, but for the overclocking, right? Because there was a limit. I think it was 800 megahertz was the max you can push the chips to within the QX line, right? And that's obviously for safety because that thing was not designed to be overclocked. So we worked with them and said, hey, this thing can handle it. As you can see here, here's what we've done. We've made the board thicker. We've upgraded the copper in it. We've got a massive cooler on it. We've got dedicated cooling on the VREGs. And we've upgraded the connection to all these different things that we can talk about more specifically. But then they said, okay, well, this thing can be overclocked. Let's go ahead and raise the limit a little bit, and so that you have a bit more room to work with. And we even gave one of these to the original developer, like, hey, you test it yourself. Don't trust us. Verify. So he started testing it himself and like, okay, I can push it more. Let me make some changes to the firmware. And it's, it also helped give back to the community because by being able to test that, they came out with some new designs like, oh, you know what? If we add this one new component called the TMUX, we can actually now read the individual chip temperatures that we couldn't do before in like the gammas. So why don't we do that? Now, that's going to make some hardware changes and firmware changes. So then they made the firmware changes, submitted that back to the main line. So now if you have that capability on your device, you can read all the individual chip temps, right? So, but yeah, we focus mainly on the hardware side. We work with the engineers on the firmware if we find anything weird going on. Because like we saw, for example, when we pushed these things past over 1,000 megahertz on massive overclock, we started seeing the amount of shares being rejected just skyrocket. And so we had to work with the firmware devs to figure out, okay, how do we tweak that? Or is there something that they can change in the back end to make it so that once we get to that high overclock, we're still able to maintain accepted shares versus rejected.
Why do shares get rejected? I've always wondered that, because when you open up your mining dashboard, you see accepted, you see rejected. Even, it doesn't matter if you're mining industrial with a high-powered ASIC or just your BitX at home, you're going to see that. So, you know how that works, like on a technical level?
No, not that deep. I'm not too deep on that one. I'd have to look that up or I'll talk with some of the engineers and devs. And people have asked that in the Discord chat, and then it just kind of goes off into like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like they get really into the weeds on, why it gets accepted versus not accepted because of this value. This is what your share gets sent to the pool. So yeah, you'd have to talk to them.
The very basic explanation that I have that shouldn't be taken at a grain of salt for sure is just the fact that the pool's already moved on to another block and you're still submitting shares on to the past block. Right. So like it's already moved, but you have some sort of latency issue going on your side that you're still fighting for the old special password, the special number to solve the block.
I wonder if anybody's ever hit a block but got a rejected share because it happened after the block was already hit.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
It's like an inception moment.
Yes.
Right? You just one behind everybody.
It could
else.
happen. I mean, theoretically.
Well, so I can't say the specific pool that we use, but the specific pool that we do use, they don't give you any extra rewards or benefits for if you solve the block. But I can say out of our, we've got like 13,000 miners running right now. We've had one miner in the past 2.5 years actually solve a block on this site, which is even crazier. Just going back to like these bit axes and stuff. Like, I mean, every weekend you're almost seeing a new post on X of, hey, I smashed a block. I smashed a block. You're looking on mempool and you're seeing Solo CK constantly hitting blocks.
Yeah.
We've hit one on a 95T. Went out there, gave it a nice little pat on the head, tell it good job. But it's interesting to see it's not as common as you'd think. Like especially over the storm, net hash rate dropped from 1.1 exahash down to 700 exahash, and when we're not underclocked, are a little over an exahash. It's like, well, so we're over 1% of like, or 0.1% of like all hash rate, and we're still only solving one block every 2.5 years. There are some crazy odds to hit this, but you look at it, still better than any other lottery system that you could get into. You know, you go off and buy a Powerball ticket or a scratch off, you're looking at.
I see people do that every week. My office is across from a gas station, and anytime that thing starts getting up on any of those like mega bucks or whatever, it's crazy. Everybody's just buying lottery tickets, and you go in there to grab like a drink or something, and you'll see 5 people in line just all buying 20 like tickets each, trying to win that thing. And I'm like, I'd rather have a Bitcoin miner at home.
I know. It's like I want to just orange pill and be like, hey, buy this thing instead. There you go.
Here's my affiliate link.
Yes.
Okay, so here's a question for somebody buying one of these Nerdy QXs or like a Nerdy QX++ as their first miner. What should they realistically expect? For example, like heat, noise, power draw, earning expectations, the earning value. Like, you know, you're a beginner, you're convinced by this, you go and buy one. What do you think?
I mean, I always recommend to people start off with the BitX. It's the small little BitX or NerdX, the single chip ones. Those are the best ones to learn from because those ones are the first ones that came out, and so there's a lot of work and research people have done on upgrades to it and understanding it and documentation of things that out there. And it's cheap enough, right? You can get it for $100 or so, or even less, depending upon your options. So that you've got a little bit of investment in it, but it's it lets you mess around with it without too much of a problem, right? So you can get in there, you can take it off, you can put the new heatsink on. Oh, it didn't work. I need to figure that out. And you start learning. I think that's just the biggest thing. So start with the single chip, the BitX, the NerdX. Really understand what it is, all the different components in it, how it all works together. You can get on the Discord and ask. And then when you're ready, jump in.
I don't want to cut you off, but is there a good resource for that? I mean, aside from the Discord?
Yeah, I mean, bidax.org is the initial one that's was maintained. A lot of good resources on there. Discord. We've put, you can follow us on Twitter. We've been producing articles and publishing articles out there. A lot of other vendors out there as well are publishing articles. Yeah, I mean, start there. Start on those. Bidax.org will give you a good overview of what's on there, what it's about, the mission. I mean, even a lot of the actual Gen AI tools now are understanding what a Bidax is, and you can ask good questions about it. So, but yeah, and then all this stuff's available on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/bidax.org, you'll find all the repositories in there, and you can click on Gamma. That's the latest, and you can read through it and see exactly what it's about, why it was built, what all the specifications, the points of it are, what are the different components for it, and you can look inside of there.
Well, and that's something I wish we would have touched off kind of more towards the beginning. But like, what makes this home mining sector and specifically the BitX community so special is the fact that everything is open source. It's just a whole bunch of nerds that came together that wanted to build some cool shit for people at home, and they want to make it easily accessible. Like you said, no. In the States, at least, 240 is not popular unless you run a separate PDU off your dryer plug, which even then you're gonna have to change the plug for your PDU.
Yeah,
that's it's like, which for most people is like, okay, never mind. I know for me personally, I ain't touching wires. I don't know how that works. I just plug the things in. So it's the fact that everything is super open source and the community comes together to build upon these things is a huge motivation for getting involved in this network. Because I never really realized how much of the open source community there is outside of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining specifically until I kind of started going into like PDUs and how they use Raspberry Pi software to run smart PDUs and stuff at scale. But you touched on it a little bit more, but just in case there was anything you missed off on, what was your real big motivation into like developing your own and like putting your own kind of mark on the space? I mean, Nerd QX now is like a staple, and I know you didn't come up with, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you came up with the coin Nerd QX or anything, but you built on top of this to an extent that it's completely reimagined. So what was your motivation behind
Well,
it?
yeah, we came up with the name QX, right? So like I said, it's a play on the QX and the plus plus, but really it goes back to the community, right? So, kind of tying into both questions is, we have been looking at all the communities, looking on X, look on Nostr, go to Reddit. I mean, there's Telegram groups, there's Facebook. I mean, all these different social media sites, people talking about bit access, nerd access. I want to do this, or what about this? And those are great places for people to learn who are new, as well as people like us who have been in this industry, and seeing what are people asking, what are they doing, what do they want to do, what can't they do, right? And that's kind of where the motivation came for the QX. Initially, we were looking at making just like a 2-chip version with the NerdX display, and we're like, all right, well, we can maybe do that. We talked to some engineers. They're like, you're basically just taking the existing QX plus and not putting 2 chips on there, right? It's like, okay, true, but that's a good point. We don't need to redesign this whole different thing just to remove the 2 chips. So we're like, all right, well, what else? So like I said, we started looking around. People saw how they can really push the BitX gamma, and then it's like, hey, can I push the QX plus plus? It's like, well, every time I try to, I pop my fuse on it, right? Or I'm running to the limits of the firmware, or hey, my power plug's getting really hot, right? Or my VREGs are like really hot. They're at 90C. That's really hot. How do I cool these things?
VREGs, real quick. VREG.
Voltage regulators, sorry. So they're the ones that provide all the voltage that's going out to the board to the chips. So those are able to operate at a higher temperature, more than like the ASICs are. But the hotter those get, the more current, the more power draw, right? So now you start losing efficiencies. So these little things is what we started seeing people complain about, like basically, hey, man, my VREGs are getting hot. So like we ended up designing a couple, little things that, actually I got one here. Just like something like this that just sits over, puts a little fan right over the VREGs for your QX++, right? But these are sort of little solutions here and there. When we took a step back and said, okay, let's take the QX++, very popular. Everyone's starting to build these right now. It's the only multi-chip miner really out there within the BitX space. The Hex development sort of died off, and then the Nerd line sort of picked up. How could we address some of these concerns that people have and really focus on, hey, we're going to target the overclocking crowd, right? This isn't going to be for somebody's first miner. It could be if you want like something that you just want run stably at one certain thing and know that it's rock solid, that you don't have to worry about it. Sure. But really that crowd that really just wants to push these things and see if they can melt it. Right. And so we started looking at the individual pieces that people were complaining about, and just basically looked at the QX++ design as a reference and said, okay, let's take it and let's reimagine it. Like you said, let's put it over here, and then let's look at the individual stuff. So we know we can cool the ASICs pretty well, right? We know we're going to be overclocking them, so we need a bigger cooler on it. And like I said, the CPU, the PC communities already solve, hot CPU type problem. They've already solved that problem. We can use ASIC or CPU coolers to cool these ASICs very, very well. And even then, from an air cooled perspective, even if you can't cool it, then you go AIO. You can go liquid cooled, right? So, like I said, that's an easy one for them to solve. It's just the other pieces.
Have you played with any of that at all? Like any of the hydro? Because I know they have that, like, it almost looks like a water fountain. I want to say there's like a big giveaway with some type. I want to. You just touched on like the Aux-X. Were you saying that? No, was that the 8-chip one?
That's the 8-chip one. Yeah, that's the one we call the Ocho. So that's when we refer to it. But yeah, so we have messed around with it. That's how we've been doing some testing for our V-Ray coolers for the Hydro series. Yeah, you just swap out the air cooler and just take a CPU AIO cooler, strap it on, and then you just plug it into the fan, plug the pump, and yeah, you can get those chips extremely cold. It works very, very well, and it's super quiet. You don't hear anything.
Anything hydro related where you actually see that CPU cooler and you see the like fluid tubes coming out is the best way to like orange pill a non-Bitcoiner. It's like, hey, look at it. They look crazy, mesmerized. Like, whoa, liquid computer. I don't think that's supposed to mix.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's just the initial hit for everybody. So it's really cool to see the development going in that way. And like you said, it's like, yeah, it might not have been designed for everybody's first miner or whatever, but dude, if you're buying something for 5 terahash out the box that you just sit there and you don't do anything with, that's a very solid home miner. 5 terahash run it in what I don't know the cost. I know the cost on a Gamma or whatever the 1.1 terahash model bit axes, you're looking at like $8-9 for Midwest electrical rates a month.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so what is that comparing to your design with 4 chips? Or is it just are you able to match that same efficiency that people are able to reach on these single chips, or are you preceding it? Are you getting a better efficiency, or is it coming back a little bit due to
It's about the same. So we've been able to get the same roughly in like the NerdAxe, the single chip line, the BitAxe one. So I think it's 15 watts per terahash, I think it was. Right. But then as you start to overclock, it's drawing more power, it's getting hotter. So the efficiency definitely goes down. But like with the QX, it's designed to either just run stably at an overclock. It's at it, it's overclocked. You're pushing the chips to over 2 terahash each, right? We in our testing with just the standard settings in the firmware with our Macs, you can get it up to 8 terahash easily, and it'll sit there really quiet and run solid with no issues. We've had people push it to 10. But they've also put liquid cooling on it. Somebody actually recently is designed, and some other folks are now designing liquid AIOs for their VREGs as well. So they
really,
because one of the things we did with the QX was that we modified the PCB board to have mounting holes so that you could mount a heatsink or like a custom AIO over the voltage regulators, so to cool those as well as the ASICs. So that allowed people to start innovating. Like if you go in the Discord channel, we can share the link here. I'll share some links later.
100%.
And if you go to our X account, you'll see it. Like somebody, did a whole liquid cooling on both the ASIC and the VREGs. They, we have the white board, so they match the white, and then they put they match the sort of bluish purple of the theme of the actual Nerd QX, and put that as the liquid color. So it's like a nice purplish hue with like the white, and then like all liquid cooled. It's really, really, really cool to see.
Yeah,
you think there's going to be more liquid cooling in the future at home? Because you think about like efficiency, and I know on the industrial scale, you see a lot of people going to liquid right now versus fan, because obviously fan has its drawbacks and challenges, as does liquid, in terms of like the infrastructure is just starting to be set up on an industrial scale at a massive scale, whereas fan cooling is very well established. But, I mean, you have guys like Kalen who just talk about the problems. What do you guys spend $10,000 a month on filters? You were saying something like that?
I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And I'm learning, having a bunch of air cooled machines. Mine always break. I mean, I've had mine a year, and I've had at least 3 to 5 downs on each machine. And I'm just like, wow, it's like I buy my, I know it's a bad comparison, but like a Mac M4 Mini, and like the thing doesn't break. You know what I mean?
I definitely do. I mean, that's actually one of the reasons. One of the products we made was an air filter for like the inline fans, people putting shrouds on, because people kept saying their stuff gets so dirty. And it's the same thing on the air cooled.
When you say inline fan, you're talking about just that regular, your S9 fan that you
no. Like you can use like a Cloud9 8-inch radial axial fans. So
really?
So we build shrouds that you can basically take the fans off, and you put the shroud on that goes from the 2 120 fans into an 8-inch opening, and then you just put an inline fan that's used for like grow tents and to evacuate air out of there. And there's other, once again, the community has developed new tools around these, and so to control that, for example, there's a Nord board that you can plug into the fan connectors, and you plug in the inline fan, and then the board controls the fan. So if it gets hotter, it turns the fan on more. If it gets colder, it cools it off. So it has that dynamic, essentially like the PWM on it.
Man, purchasing directly from these large manufacturers, specifically Bitmain, because I haven't dealt with any large new purchases from MicroBT or anything. But I mean, I'm looking at it, when I say dead on arrival, I'm not talking every chip's broken, power supply's broke with all 4 fans, but I've got either a bad fan on this unit, or I've got a bad chip on one of my hash boards, or I got a bad PSU on probably like 2 to 3% is like happy. Like if that's all that hit, and I'd be like, hell yeah, like that's a good good deployment, So what do you, I know you said you're buying new chips directly from Bitmain. Do you think this is a manufacturing issue on Bitmain's side, or is it kind of like the issue in the hardware itself? Are you guys experiencing similar dead on arrival numbers when you're creating something new? You give it its quick little burn-in period of half an hour or whatever. What does that process look like when people are buying directly from you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I should go back to the other one. We are seeing a lot more people interested in doing liquid cooling, doing AIOs and strapping those onto a lot of these devices, whether it's the single chip or even the multi chips. And then going to we do see that. So we see it a lot more when we do the desoldering of the chips. We usually lose about 5% that just don't work or don't hash up to what we need to hash, or lazy, for example. So we go through that period. We'll get them onto the miner. We'll let them run for a couple hours and test them out. Do they hit 1 terahash at a minimum? 1 terahash? Do they hold that for that time? And as one of our first QC steps, and we see about 5% that just don't hit it, and we have to move on. The newer chips, if we're able to get them, those have a much higher success rate. I think we only see maybe 1 or 2% that have some issues, and usually it's just silicon lottery, whatever bin that one was put in at that time, and it needs more voltage to get it to that same level. So we've had to tweak things a little bit here and there on the settings that we ship out, and update some of the firmware stuff too. But yeah, that's kind of what we've seen.
I was just about to hit on. I'm so glad you used the phrase, the silicone lottery, man. Like it blew my mind when my boss finally explained to me like the difference in the bin chipset, right?
Yep.
So and I'm gonna say a number that is probably not a chip, but when we're just talking about like your traditional 3700, what BM 3700 or whatever, is that are you including bin in that? Because I know if I've got some J Pros is what I'm mainly running on site, and we have to do a whole bunch of hashboard consolidation. I have a simple hashboard tester. It tells me if the thing's good or bad. It tells me the specifications, but that's beyond me. I just take a good board, put it in with other good boards, bad board. I put it off for the people that know more, right? So it's like how do I phrase it? In that case, like I'm looking at a 96 terahash unit, a 100 terahash unit, a 104 terahash unit, and that's all the same BM chip line, but it's a different bin. So are you guys only getting from like bin 1, if bin 1 is the best ideal board, or what is that process like for you guys? Are you guys kind of nitpicking?
Yeah, well, we try to be, but the biggest challenge is what's available. So like I said, if we're desoldering, we just get the one hash board, right? So when we first started desoldering, we get our hash boards from Altair out of Missouri, and it's great. They're able to send us a brand new hash board that they've tested that's run fine, and we'll take that and start desoldering it. When we were getting like the S21 XP boards, I believe it was the last ones we bought. Originally, when we desolder them, we took a look at them. They're 1370s, but they're PAs. It's like, okay, so that's the PA version. They run great. They've got good solid, 1.1 terahash. No issues with power or anything like that. Next board we get BCs. And it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at these ones, perform a little bit differently. And then the same thing happened. We bought some new chips, and they were the PM variant, right? The PMs are the ones that are on the hydro units. They're on the ones that are the air-cooled. So they have a different tinning on the back, and they require more watts, but they produce more terahash, which is slightly different than like the PAs. And then we're seeing, we just got ordered. We thought we ordered PAs from the vendor, but the vendor sent us BB chips. We're like, we've never heard of these ones. What are these ones? So it's like, there's all these different bins and different qualities. You have PA, BC up here. You have PM, and then PF are the other ones that we're looking at too. And then you have BC, BBs. So like, there's all these different bins, and basically, just whatever comes out, how they made it, what they tested at. Okay, it's within this voltage range and this frequency. Okay, you're getting BB. You're in that bin. You're in this bin. So, they all perform differently. We're able to tell. We notice them when we put them into the QX and we really push it. Once we get up to that, 1,000 megahertz, that max overclock, that's when you start seeing the differences between all the chips. But down sort of the normal levels, the normal settings that we put in there, you can't really notice, especially from a user perspective. So, but yes, that's been a challenge of what chips are we getting this time? No,
that's nice to know, man. Like when I figured out that it was just okay, well, they're producing the 1070 chips or BM 1070 chips or whatever. They just produce 10,000 of them. Then they test them all. And then they're like, okay, this 25% was on the high end. So I'm going to sell that for more. And I'm going to, even though it's the exact, that like for real, that took me away. I was like, oh, so that's why there's like 20 different variations of a Pro and an S19 Pro, J Pro. Then there's a J Pro 96 and a Pro 96 and a J Pro 104 and a Pro 104. And then there's just a S19 104. It's crazy.
Have you ever like watched how they actually manufacture chips? I watched like a 30-minute video once on YouTube, and it was just the most fascinating thing how they build those facilities and how they build them like wafers with light. It's insane. It's like watching some alien tech.
I worked with a guy who a weird contractor guy at a site that I used, a little 2 megawatt site that I used to work at, who was trying to mine off of S9s in 2021. So not the best scope, right? But I worked with a guy that claimed to be ahead of some ASIC manufacturer. It wasn't like Bitcoin SHA-256 ASICs, but it was just an ASIC manufacturer in general. And in the novelties that go around some of those assembly lines and making sure that everything is just, perfect to make it. It's kind of crazy to see what all goes in the back end and stuff that we don't really have to worry about or experience, like deal with at all. It's neat to see how the industry flows together.
And they just come up new ones all the time. Like I said, like, we had the PMs we thought were the latest. Now PF is another variation out there that from what we can research, it's just, once again, there's no documentation, no real specifics from Bitmain out there on all these different chips. So we just kind of go what the community has found and, what we find in telling other people. And then, now they've got the S23 that's going to be coming out with the 1340 chip, which is, massive compared to the 1370. So, that's going to be the whole thing over again. The cycle will start over again, right? Like, let's figure out how this chip works, what variations are there, what's its in and outs, and try to see if we can adapt that going forward too.
That I was just about to ask if anybody has tried. Is the S23? It's probably a question I should know. Is the S23 Air even out yet?
I think they canceled the Air. There's been a lot of
Hydro.
I think it's just Hydro. Yeah, I don't know if it's just because Bitcoin price, slowing sales, and all that. But from what I've seen, from what a couple of people have posted, is that the Air's canceled, at least for now. They're really just going to be doing the Hydro. So that makes it a bit of a challenge, right? Because one of the things that we were hoping of is that when that came out, everybody would jump to that, and then the BM 1370 chips price goes down. We can start getting those chips a lot easier, because like right now, we used to be able to get like 1368s, and 66 is really, really cheap once 1370 came out. So we were hoping for that, but they keep delaying it, and can't control that piece. So
that's crazy, because the hosted mining facility that I'm with, they were taking pre-orders for that months ago, where you could just prepay and you could get like a 23 air cooled. And I've seen other hosts do that. So that makes you wonder, maybe you've got, there could be millions and millions of dollars, of tens of millions in orders that are just sitting there that they've taken money for. And they're just like, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. What a logistics nightmare as a business owner, just thinking about having to deal with that. I don't know, maybe a company the size of Bitmain, they're just like, whatever, we don't care. We have bigger fish to fry, but that's wild to think about.
By no means do I have like experience in the professional world. My professional world is Bitcoin mining startups, which if you know anything about Bitcoin mining startups, it is the complete opposite of professional. But it seems that like the Bitcoin mining industry has some major oversights on the professional sense, that a majority of people that come out from like real jobs and stuff come over here and they're like, holy shit, they still haven't figured this out yet.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and that goes through like hosted clients, hosting sites, just starting up your own site, working with the power providers, and how everybody views the industry. But it definitely seems like we're pretty far behind on the whole build up thing over here, which makes things a little bit more difficult to get done. And maybe that's just an essence, like I'm pretty low on the totem pole when it comes to these operations, but just from my side on how we've had to deal with different vendors, or hell, even repair part people, like when we're trying to get fans or power supplies for some of the newer S21s units, it's like the communication between people is extremely unprofessional. I'm hearing bros and emails. There's no, it's like everything is just like, I should be saying this. You shouldn't be saying this to me. It's like, it doesn't compute for me.
The good thing about that though is while yeah, you're right. It does seem like the Wild West, especially coming from some other businesses that are, that I've been in. But I think that at any place you have problems, you have opportunities, right? So there are entrepreneurs out there who are just sitting there looking for something to start. And if you're passionate about Bitcoin, go figure out some problem that's solved, and if you can solve it, you're going to make some money and turn that into a life for yourself. So that's good. So another question here, because we're kind of starting to run out of time. Where is the Nerd QX headed next? For example, more ASICs, better efficiency, better UX, lower barriers to entry. Like anything you can tell us?
Yeah, so actually, Caitlin talked about it, like mentioned the Ocho, right? That was something that we were early on about a year ago trying to develop, and that design itself is, it came out. There's been some iterations, but it needs what we call like the QX overhaul, right? It needs, let's step back, take this. What are some of the problems we're seeing now? Because that one, for example, is coming out onto the market, and people are starting to buy those. People like power mining and whatnot are producing massive amounts of these. You see these coming out of Asia as well. So we're trying to see what people are doing with those, and what upgrades and what needs to happen with that, and maybe look at building an OX, the OX, right? Sort of an 8-chip version, but it goes to, once again, chips, right? So that's still hitching our wagons to Bitmain 1370s, which are already hard to come by. Now we have to double the amount of chips per miner. So when looking at the future for the QX, we've got a couple other updates that we kind of wanted to make to it, based upon feedbacks from users. We've already made some changes. There's been some component updates and some firmware updates, but no other real changes, at least at this time. There's some other miners that we're looking at. So like you said, there's other chips out there. We've got some R9 chips when 256 was giving them away. We've talked with some other vendors, some other manufacturers out there. Okay, what do you want to build? What are we building? The thing with the other chips, they're not as performant as the Bitmain. So customer's going to expect, I got a single chip 1.1 terahash. That's the gamma. That's the bar. Whereas if you use the Intel chips, you got to get like 2 or 3 of these chips to match that. So, but the price point's lower. So for us, really, we're actually looking at how we can look at building one elegance of performance for other miners that are already out there. So we did that with the QX, right? The GT 801 was finally released, right? This is the 2-chip variation that's out there. And so we've got some more accessories and stuff that we're building for that. The ability to, once again, can you overclock that? You should be able to get at least 4 terahash out of that, right? So we've got a new product coming out that'll allow you to take the same cooler that's on the QX++, the AXP90s, and put that on new GT and overclock it, or a new stand. Some things like inline power fuses. So really focusing on that in the short term, and really seeing, maybe it is for an update, a Rev 2 for the QX, and or a 6 or an 8-chip version with the Bitmain. It's really going to come down to chips. It's really what it comes down to, on what that market looks like and how that flows out for the rest of the year. Is it going to be easier and cheaper to get Ardyne? Do the upfront cost, build a new miner, get that out there, get the firmware supporting it, to get cheaper chips that are more abundant, versus keep rolling with Bitmain, and maybe the S23 comes out, maybe the 1370 chips come down in price. So we'll just have to see how that market goes. And, as a manufacturer, we just have to keep watch on that. And one thing, with we've been doing repairs for a lot of these as well. So if you fry your BitAx or you fry your QX++, it's popping fuses. Since we manufacture, we're very familiar with them. So we get to see a lot of the different, what people are building, what people are doing to these, what mods they're putting on them, and seeing, maybe this is stuff that we can look at incorporating into other folks.
Okay, so what does the product life cycle on one of these look like? And what I mean by that is, to be more specific, how much dev time, how long is the product on market, and then at what point are you like, okay, we can't get the chips, or the market has evolved too much? If you had to kind of like give some time frames.
You got to move fast, and that's just the thing. Once you get the product out there, it's got a long longevity. So like with the QX, for example, that took us many months of working with the engineer, Phil. So Phil, he's another just engineer that's in the OSME community. He actually built a 12-chip version called the EcoMiner. So
Oh.
even massive. He just keep throwing chips on these things, and that was a pain for him to cool. But we had him do the development. We worked with Trendcraft, Andreas, who's been really plugged into the community and really supports the community for this Floodbase, floodbase.com. And that, like I said, that took us several months to get this development. We ordered multiple boards, get that testing, get chips. We got those in. But once we got that set up, now we've got the QX. I mean, we imagine we'll be running with the QX for the rest of this year, right? I mean, obviously, it only took 2 months for the AliExpress versions to come up once they saw the repo. But we've got our dedicated V-Ray heatsink that we've got for it, that we've designed for it. That's the differentiator. Our board, our PCB material is different. We use a higher copper pore in it. All the other, the coolers we use, the fans we use, even down to the thermal paste, right? So we have these other differentiators that makes ours, just a little bit better than those folks out there. And typically, like I said, this is going to last at least another year. I mean, the Gammas have been around for a year and this late 2024. So, and that's still going, right? They're still making them. They have a new 603 version, so that's still going. So it's really just the development. The upfront, you got to be fast to develop it and then get that new version out there. Because once it's out there, then everyone's going to start getting it and start building it, and then you're going to see that.
Sounds like a wild and exciting business to be in. Well, Sean, you've been awesome. That's been really, really interesting and fascinating. Thank you so much for taking your time. Where can somebody watching this find you online?
So we're on basically all the social media sites. So on X at XTech Crypto, we're on Noster, XTech, on Reddit, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everything on there. Go to our website, xtech.xyz. You can send us an email, support@xtech.xyz. You can just chat with us live off the website too. That usually goes to me. So you'll be chatting with a real person and not an AI bot. So if you got questions, just hit me up, and hopefully the wife won't yell at me while I'm on my phone. But if not, we'll get back to you. But yeah, reach out wherever you can.
That's always nice to hear that you haven't replaced yourself with a Claude bot or a Molt bot or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
I had to deal with a few those weekend, but yeah, every single one of his links that he just said down below are going to be in the description. So head over there, head over to his Discord. He also he threw that out earlier. We're going to make sure that everybody that wants to get into this home mining sector, come talk to the pros, man. Talk to the people that have been doing this for a year. He mentioned on those Alibaba sites, everybody's selling them for real. Be careful. He wasn't kidding just because he's making the good ones. Like those are like actually sketchy. There's been a lot of fires already. Yeah. So know your source, buy directly from it.
100%. And the last thing here before we sign off, I want to say, if you want to learn more about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, we have some fantastic Telegram groups. Kalen is popping on the screen right now. We have a massive Telegram community, and that is an excellent educational resource. So make sure you check those out. But I just want to say again, Sean, thank you. And we are signing off.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll see you guys later. Thank you again.